Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, based on where you are in the world, I suppose. My name is Rudy, and I'm one of the admission reps here on Team Design Lab. And I'm also joined today by Konstantinos, who's going to be hosting our webinar related to prototyping. We're really excited to have him here, and we're excited you all can be here today, too. We're going to give it probably just about another minute or two before Konstantinos starts his presentation, just to make sure that everyone's able to sign on and participate. And in the meantime, while everyone's joining, we'd love to know who all is here with us today. So, oh my gosh, Chad, you're amazing. Love that you were the first person to get the chat started today. We'd love to have you all just take a minute to say hi, let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from. Awesome, cool, good to see William. PJ, this is great. We're so excited that you're all here. Just a couple of other quick housekeeping things that I wanted to run through before we get started. In addition to saying hi and introducing yourself, feel free to also share LinkedIn information if you're interested in making connections with folks who are here on the webinar. That's just a great way to do a bit of networking and build some connections. Feel free to drop your LinkedIn links there in the chat as well. We are going to be recording this presentation, and it will be available via Design Lab's YouTube channel after we finished as well. So I'll make sure to post a link for where you can find our YouTube channel if you want to go back and review it later. And then finally, next to the chat section, you'll also see an icon in this little menu in the lower right corner for questions. So if you have any questions whatsoever as Konstantinos is going through his presentation, please do drop those over in the questions section. I'll answer any that I am able to as we go along, and there will also be a Q&A session at the end of his presentation. So we'll make sure to talk through any questions that you have for him about the content as well. Awesome. It's so great to see you all here. Thanks,
so
everyone.
Many places, really, like every continent is represented, I feel.
It's true. I don't know if we have Antarctica yet, but maybe we'll have someone jump in from like a biological station or something there. That'd be very cool. Great, awesome. Well, we've got lots of people here. There may be just a couple more tuning in, but Konstantinos, if you'd like to just go ahead and introduce yourself and get your screen all set up, then we'll be excited to get going.
So bear with me, guys, for a moment. First of all, let me say before I share my screen and my presentation, it's a pleasure to be with all of you here. Thanks for the invitation, Rudy, and to Emily, who is not here right now with us, but thank you both for organizing this. It's a pleasure, to talk with people from all around the world and share knowledge and, network and connect this way. It's been, challenging times for everyone. And I think that this is one of those things that keep us going, kind of like sharing knowledge and connecting this way from different parts of the world for a shared cause, which is to improve our skills and, design as an industry and so on. So I wanted to say that the presentation you're going to watch today, that I'm going to deliver today, you are the first international audience that is going to watch it. So I have delivered it once more at a local university here in Cyprus, where I'm based currently. I think people appreciated it at the university. It received quite good feedback. And I discussed with Emily the possibility to deliver it to you guys today. I'm excited to hear your feedback at the end, also regarding, how you found the slides, the layout, and so on. So feel free to share any feedback you have in the comments or questions section in the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me. Rudy, can you confirm that you can see the cover slide?
Yes, I do see it.
Perfect. So welcome, guys, to this presentation. It's titled 5 Prototyping Decisions Everyone Needs to Make. I put together this presentation thinking that, there is many times and cases where we might need to prototype, be it for work purposes or for a university project, or just to test things out, validate an idea and so on. However, people generally tend to be a little bit confused as to when and why they prototype. This presentation can cover, I think, different parts of knowledge that you might find useful even if you have some experience with prototyping, but I think that the ones of you that will benefit from it the most are people who, you don't consider yourselves experts, you are learning, and I guess that will be the majority of you following from home or from your office today. So without further ado, let's just jump in. I'm going to introduce myself first so that you know a few things about me. So my name is Konstantinos. I'm originally from Athens, the capital of Greece, and I currently live in Cyprus working for Proto.io Inc. I have a background in marketing from a university in Greece and destination management as a master's degree from a university in Slovenia, Ljubljana. I saw there are people from both Greece and Slovenia with us today on the chat. So Kalispera, Živio, to you at home. It's nice to be here with you. I have an experience of about 10 years in marketing. I've worked mostly with companies that consider themselves tech companies, even though they might, specialize in something a bit more specific. So I have worked with some big names such as Trivago and Amazon in the past. I've worked a lot with content, with account management, advertising, like banner ads, and managing big client accounts. So I've tried basically a little bit of everything when it comes to marketing. And here at Proto.io, I lead a small team of marketing professionals. We do a lot of nice video productions, a lot of visuals that you might see on our websites, and so on and so forth. I gained a lot of knowledge when it comes to design. I did not have that expertise before, and I'm really, really happy, and honored that I had this opportunity. It really, I feel like it made me much more, let's say, it kind of like gave me more holistic, approach to marketing, because it can be very visual and it should be very visual. So this is who I am. Some things about the company, Proto.io. So Proto.io, although if you visit our website, might seem like a pretty, like a fresh company, like a startup mentality and so on. It's actually a much older company. So it started at 1998 as SNQ Digital. That was its name back then. It produced one of the first content management systems to circulate globally, even before WordPress became a big thing. The company had some clients with that content management system, mostly in Europe, UK, Italy, Greece, and Cyprus. And then the company kind of shifted its attention a little bit to making websites and apps for, big like companies, startups, newspapers, sports groups, and so on, locally here in Cyprus and in other countries. While doing that, what the company realized is that they were lacking a way to kind of showcase an idea to people without having to spend all of their energy and time and, like money on developing something that looked almost finished or final. This is what we call today prototyping, but back then it didn't really exist as a term, or even if it did, it was not really, well known to the wide public. So with that idea in mind, they started developing, a solution first to be used internally in-house to cover that need. But then they saw that people were interested in it and they wanted to buy it. So what started as basically an internal launch kind of became the MVP of a product that people cared about. And this is what we know today as Proto.io. Proto.io became publicly available in 2013. It was one of the first widely available prototyping tools, and it has served hundreds of thousands of individual users, companies around the world. Today is one of the names that people usually know when they talk about prototyping, along with many other, good tools that are out there in our environment and industry. And because our company, as you might have guessed from the story thus far, likes to innovate and likes to think outside the box. So while working with Proto.io, again, there was another internal need, and that was a way to kind of like improve the flows, how the experience, let's say, the UI and the experience of applications and websites. That was something that initially the company was thinking to incorporate inside Proto.io, but this became quite big by itself, and this is what we know today as user flow diagramming. So we developed another tool, and this is the little brother or sister product, call it as you may, of Proto.io. It's called Overflow. It became publicly available in 2018. So this is where we are today. We're a company with 2 products, and we're a team that tries to juggle both of them, especially as a marketing professional. I can tell you, it's like having 2 kids and you try to give them equal attention. It's quite interesting. So actually, our goal, our vision as a company is to enable product teams to build better products. We don't like to call our tools, kind of like tools or products. We like to call them solutions, because we like to solve problems the same way that we solved our internal problems. We like, to give the audience out there, like other companies like ours, freelancers, students, solutions to kind of like grow and improve their workflow and their business. Some more things about the company, and I think this is the last slide about that. So we are about 35, more or less 35 to 40 employees. The number, of course, changes every now and then. We have at the moment 1 million plus active users from 160 plus countries worldwide. We serve a very wide variety of countries. The English-speaking world is, obviously kind of like leading the scorecard, but we even have, clients in very small remote places, such as, some small islands in the Pacific. It's really interesting, to see how people embrace our product from all different, edges of the world and the globe. So without further ado, let's jump to our topic and why you are here today. I put a little bit of an introduction. I had actually included these slides because the class that I first presented this presentation to was an entrepreneurship class, but I found these slides interesting for everyone who is kind of like a beginner with prototyping, so I kept them in to also present them to you. So a question that I'm trying to answer here as kind of like an intro to the presentation is, how can prototypes lead to entrepreneurial success? There's a few reasons that we can highlight. One good reason why we might want to prototype as entrepreneurs or as wannabe entrepreneurs is because we want to validate our ideas early, and that is very important because especially if you're not a company with a lot of resources, usually you just have that much time or money to be able to deliver something that gives you some good feedback. Prototypes are a good way to do that without spending too much effort and too much money, and you can even do it as a standalone, as a single person, which is really important for aspiring entrepreneurs. Another reason is, as I mentioned before, this goes hand in hand with the point before, because you can save time, money, and other resources. Actually developing a full product can cost a lot of money, and sometimes it's not even needed if we're not sure that this product has an audience and people will be interested in it. It's just a shame to spend all of this effort, to not achieve anything, basically. Another reason why people might prototype in an entrepreneurial environment is because it helps them, the prototypes help them align cross-team or with other colleagues throughout product development. We're going to learn more about that as we go inside the presentation, but I can give you a small hint already. Prototypes are a great way, for example, for designers to communicate with developers. So keep that little note in mind. We're going to talk about it more a little bit later. And lastly, prototypes help us understand what the audience needs are, sometimes even before we launch the product. Actually, most of the times before we launch the product, we can test our prototype with potential users or users of similar products and try to understand what they like, what they don't like, and how we can cover more of their needs. Prototyping as a term is quite broad, and we've noticed, from different articles that we read or from conferences that we attend and we talk to people, people tend to consider prototyping to be many different things. It seems like everyone has their own definition. So it will help you to follow this presentation to know what I and what we as a company define as prototyping. So for us, for me and for us here in Proto.io, prototyping is a complete user experience, but without a fully developed product. So basically, someone can play with your prototype and get a very good idea of what your potential future product is all about. They can give you concrete feedback, but they don't really have the full functionality, to be able to experience an app or a website 100%. So this is what we define as a prototype. However, as I mentioned, prototyping means different things for everyone. Some of the most common, definitions that we have seen so far. Some people say that for them, prototypes are click-through kind of like prototypes with finished designs. So they like to have final designs, and they like to show how the screens connect to one another. If I click on this button, it takes me there. If I click on that image, it takes me there, and so on and so forth. For some other people, prototypes are kind of like single screens. They just like to look at each screen individually, and they like to add some micro animations to mimic realistic behavior of like an app or a website. So if, let's say, you have kind of like a loading sequence and it shows 3, I don't know, dots, rotating around like your logo or something, they like to do that in their prototype to kind of like show this animation and how it would work. For other people, it can be something even more generic and abstract. It can be anything that they consider unfinished, but they can still present it without, feeling ashamed of it to someone to get some quick feedback. So basically, it can be any of those or all of them together. For different people, it means something else or some other, definition that I have not included here. So one thing that people usually think about when they talk about prototypes and they consider them in their workflow, let's take this example. We have a product owner, and this product owner, they might think, in my team, me or someone else I work with, we have strong design skills. At least one person in the team has strong design skills. So I mean, a prototype is better if they have high fidelity, so finished, polished designs, right? Like, this is a common thought that many people have, that to prototype, they need to have something that looks really polished and professional. Actually, this is a misconception, and I'm here today to kind of like demolish that misconception, I hope. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. Definitely, if you have finished designs, you can achieve some things a bit better. But it's not the ideal solution for every scenario and for every case. So I'm here to show you, all the different scenarios and what is better for each one of them. So this common, misconception and thought about high fidelity designs brings me to the first question of the 5 that we're gonna try to answer today. And question 1 is, what level of visual fidelity do I need? And let me tell you that this question is not really dependent on if you have a designer in your team or not. Clearly, if you have a designer in your team, or if you are a designer yourself, you have more options. But it doesn't really mean that you need to limit yourself because you have a designer or because you don't. So try to answer this question, but first let's try to understand what visual fidelity is and what levels of visual fidelity exist and we can utilize in our prototypes. So to begin with, we have low visual fidelity. Low visual fidelity is basically anything that can be drawn by hand. It can be like a sketch on a napkin. It can be something like boxes, like something very simple that kind of showcases that where this is an image should go, like placeholder kind of boxes, Anything like that is a low fidelity prototype. I know that this, low fidelity sketch that we have here still looks quite elaborate because, the designer in our team actually, is really talented. And this is, for her, this is a simple sketch. But if I had done this, it could look very different and much simpler, and still it would count as a low fidelity prototype as long as it shows where things should be. Let me mention, by the way, as a parenthesis, that for the purposes of this presentation, we have put together the screens of an imaginary retail store selling sofas. And it's a mobile app, just so it's easier to fit screens, you know, in the presentation, and you can compare things a bit easier. But the same could apply for also a, you know, a website for a desktop or a TV prototype or anything else. So don't just limit yourselves thinking about phones. I just picked a, you know, mobile app prototype because it's just easier for us to see things side by side in a small screen. So this is what a low fidelity prototype would look like, low visual fidelity. Let's go to medium. So medium basically is kind of like, you know, it looks kind of like the wireframe of an app or a website. If you take all of the proper elements, like a bit of typography, you know, kind of like image placeholders, you take a bit of care about the spacing, you know, you have some icons like the little heart one. Maybe you include the top bar of the phone with a time indicator and, you know, the energy indicator and Wi-Fi connection. But still, as you can see, this by no means would be kind of like a final app that you would see on your phone. Again, let me remind you that the low fidelity prototype looks a little bit too elaborate because, you know, our designer has these skills and could just sketch it this way. But in reality, a medium fidelity prototype gives you theoretically a better idea of what an app should look like than a low fidelity prototype. And then we have the high fidelity prototype, which is, it looks like basically the real thing. I think you would agree with me. This could be a screen of an app, you know, of a store selling sofas, where you can, you know, choose the color of your sofa between yellow, green, and black. You can read the description, add it to the cart, and, you know, see more similar products and even like the product by clicking on the heart icon. So we have this kind of like 3 levels of fidelity. Basically the first one you can do on your own, so you can just sketch it by yourself. The other 2 you might need the help of some design tool, you know, to kind of like put together. So the medium fidelity one would be easy, let's say, to put together in a prototyping or a design tool, especially prototyping tools that have some UI components ready. Prot.io, for example, offers that, many others do. You can just drag and drop things like all of these icons that you see, or the top bar of the phone. All of these usually come ready inside the prototyping tools, and you can just like put together a medium fidelity prototype like this easily. The high fidelity one requires some design skills because, you know, you need to know a bit more about spacing, typography, color balance, branding elements, things like that. So these are the 3 levels of visual fidelity, and we will see further down the line where each one comes in handy a bit more than the other. But before we do, we're going to answer the second question because the 2 kind of go hand in hand. So we spoke so far about how our prototype looks like, how elaborate the design is. What we didn't discuss is the other element of a prototype, which is kind of like the dynamic connection between screens. So, you know, the way that screens interact with each other. If I click here, it will take me there, and so on and so forth. This is called interaction fidelity. So we had visual fidelity before and interaction fidelity now. The 2 of them together, if you put them together, kind of create basically the prototype. So when we talk about interaction fidelity, we're going to see a screen here that is going to be animated and move constantly, but please focus on one screen at a time. I'm going to guide you so that you can do that. So let's look first at the left screen. The left screen is the low interaction fidelity screen. By the way, let me do a small parenthesis here and say that we kept the same visual fidelity across all of these because I want you to focus now on interaction fidelity. So I want the visual fidelity to be the same so that you can focus on animation, movement, interaction with the screen and its capabilities. So let's focus on the low interaction fidelity on the very left. As you can see on this screen, anywhere, no matter where I click on that screen, my screen does one simple thing. It just changes the color of the couch and it highlights the corresponding, let's say, circle below that is the color indicator. On this low interaction fidelity, we have not added, more kind of like elaborate animations or gestures or kind of like things that make it look like a real app, like finger kind of gestures and moves that you can do with a real mobile app. We just click on it anywhere on the screen, and all it can do is this. The only reason why we do this is because we want to kind of like showcase a specific maybe feature, you know, of our app, which is the color selector here, for example. Now, if you focus your eyes and attention to the middle screen, the medium interaction fidelity, the difference here is that I don't click anywhere, and no matter where I click, you know, like the screen just changes color one at a time. I can pick specifically color from the color selector. So if I click on the green dot, I see the green couch. If I click on the black dot, I see the black couch. And I don't need to do them in a specific order. I can click on the yellow first, then go to the black, then to the green. Whereas in the first one, the low one, I could only do this in the order that the dots are placed. So it was kind of like a simpler interaction. Here, things are a bit more complex. I have a bit more options. If we now go to the high interaction fidelity, which is the rightmost screen, you can see that we have added even more elements. I can click on the heart icon and actually activate it. I can not only click on the color selector, but I can also kind of mimic the behavior of a finger and swipe through the couches and see different colors. So this shows me the true, you know, interaction capabilities that my final app is going to have. To create a high interaction fidelity prototype takes a bit of effort and thinking, and probably design thinking as well, and you know, some UX skills. So it takes a bit more effort and time. And as we will see in the next slides, although this looks great and very professional, it's not essential for every stage of the product development process. So as we spoke before about high visual fidelity, the same with high interaction fidelity. Putting more work doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. It all depends on where we are at the product development process. So now let's try to combine all of this information and try to answer question 3, which is, when should I prototype? So this is actually a question that is very critical. The easy answer that I could give you is that you should and can prototype literally at every stage of product development. It never hurts to prototype. It gives you feedback. It gives you insights. It gives you knowledge about your product and your audience. However, not everyone has, you know, the time to prototype constantly and more than once or twice throughout the process. So here we're gonna see when we should prototype and also with what kind of fidelity. So that's why I said we are combining all of the information. One time when people like to prototype, as I mentioned earlier, is the early stage, when we have an idea and we need to get the proof of concept and test different alternatives. Maybe we have a couple different designs in mind, potentially layouts. We want to know if this idea even makes sense to people, if we think that it has any potential altogether. So I have created with our design team this matrix. On the horizontal axis of this table, you can see interaction fidelity. So 1 little icon means low interaction fidelity and 3 means high interaction fidelity. For those of you who don't know, this little thunder icon is a very typical prototyping icon that indicates interaction, in case you were not familiar with that. And on the vertical axis, we see the visual fidelity. So from the hand sketch at the very bottom, all the way to the final polished designs at the very top. So we're at the early stage. We want to get proof of concept and we want to test alternatives. What combination of visual and interaction fidelity should we go for? This is our suggestion. We think that the ideal scenario in this case is to go with minimum effort and put together a low visual and low interaction fidelity prototype. The reason you want to save time, you might not have the resources to design, and at the end of the day, you might dismiss your idea very quickly. So it's better to just get the feedback fast and know if you need to iterate or continue. And a low visual, low interaction fidelity can help you achieve that. However, it also works, and it's not too much effort to put together, you know, a medium visual fidelity and a medium interaction fidelity as well. And that's why you might see that we have highlighted, you know, the bottom left box with a darker color and 3 more around it with, you know, a more pale color, because we do think that this could work as well without it being an overkill. Any other scenario, so the boxes that remain gray, it is a bit of an overkill. You spend too much effort and it's really not necessary, and it might be more of a waste of energy than anything else. So this is the early stage. Another time when people prototype is the post-design stage. So, you know, we have gained, you know, proof of concept. We continued with our application. We even hired or assigned to one of our designers to, you know, to create final screens for us. And the designer has put together the design, and they need feedback on design details. So they want us to be able to play with the app a bit and see if the design makes sense in context, not just like as, you know, static screens on a piece of paper or, you know, on a design tool file. So a prototype would help us see the screens in context. For this purpose, we recommend, obviously, you know, a high visual fidelity prototype, because the designs are final and they're finished. So the designer needs feedback on their work. And for it to make a bit more sense and to be able to give us the context, we need a little bit of interaction fidelity as well. So we recommend medium interaction fidelity here. The designer should not put all of the effort to think of all of the scenarios and how to animate every single element on the screen, but it would be nice if they can animate, you know, specific things, show us how some buttons work, where they take us, you know, and so on and so forth. But the other 2 scenarios, like low or high interaction fidelity, also works if the designer feels confident and they really have a very solid idea of what they want to do. They can go for a high interaction fidelity prototype as well. And another case, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the last, is the pre-development stage. Here we are towards the end, let's say, of the product development process, at least for the MVP, where the developers, you know, they have received designs. There has been a handoff between the designer and the developer, and the developers need to do the sprint planning process to kind of like allocate story points, maybe to see how much effort they need to put into developing this project and so on. Usually, let me tell you, at least from my own experience, if you put designers and developers in one room and they discuss about these things together, it can take them forever. There are a lot of misunderstandings. Prototypes help solve these misunderstandings by giving developers a very visual and very hard to miss and confuse kind of like indicator of what they need to do. So for this case, because developers need to have something that looks kind of like the real thing, what they need to develop, we definitely need to go with you know, high visual fidelity designs, because, as I mentioned before, designers have finished their job already. And the ideal scenario is that the interaction fidelity is also high, so that they can know all of the different scenarios, what they need to animate, what they need to develop, and how it needs to work, if there is a delay in the animation, and so on and so forth. In some cases, developers are fine even, you know, with in this scenario with not fully finished designs if these are not available, because you might come across the case in your work nowadays or in the future that, for example, developers want to prepare kind of like the framework of how the app is going to work, so they care more to know the functionality than have the finished designs. This is a scenario that might come up on the table, and in this case, you can even give them medium fidelity designs because they don't really care what the couch is going to look like. They just care to see where it's going to be placed on the screen and how, you know, the user can interact with that image and so on. But still, the interaction fidelity needs to be high so that they know all of the functionality they need to develop. So these are kind of like the 2 most common scenarios. In other things, you might see something different, but at least from my experience in the industry, these are the 2 most common scenarios between designers and developers at this handoff stage. So these are the main times when people might prototype. As I mentioned before, you don't need to limit yourself to these 3 let's say, milestones of the product development process. You can prototype literally at any given point. You can even prototype for practice or, to boost your imagination. But these are three, like good cases that you might see in your career in the future or even these days. Now moving on to the fourth question, which is a very common we get, especially in conferences, where people want to learn more about how to prototype and what they can get with prototyping. They always ask us, like, we have such a big toolkit, which tools shall we use to prototype? I'll start this section by talking a bit about design tools, which is a very common scenario these days. I think most of you, if not all of you, have been a bit familiarized with some of the most popular design tools, such as like Sketch, Adobe XD, Figma, you name it. Most of these tools in the last few years, they have introduced some prototyping capabilities. For the most part, these prototyping capabilities are screen-to-screen transitions. So what we call basic prototyping capabilities. However, they have introduced them, and for many people, these work great. And if it works for them, they're more than welcome to try this out. However, what I'm here to show you today is, what design tools can do well when it comes to prototyping and what prototyping tools can do well, so that you can make a more informed decision based on your specific use case or scenario you might be facing at work or, in your studies, so that you can make a better decision. So design tools. If we look at design tools and some of their most, their strongest points when it comes to design and prototyping, prototypes need design. Many times they need design. You can do hand sketches, but very often they need, some design elements. So this you can do in design tools. You can obviously design both low fidelity and high fidelity screens. You can, put together screens just made out of boxes, or you can design properly polished like designs as we saw before. In a design tool, you can make a click-through prototype, as I mentioned before, screen by screen click-through, see if I click on this button, it takes me to the next screen, and so on. You can share your work with stakeholders and colleagues to get some feedback, so they can send you written feedback. And almost all of the design tools that are popular nowadays, they don't require any coding skills. So you can just design just by, by having design skills. And being familiar with the tool. When we look at these points, prototyping tools can do all of the aforementioned things, but you cannot really design high fidelity screens easily because, you are lacking some of the basic design tools and features, rather, that design tools have. So you can still, create low fidelity screens. As I mentioned before, most of the prototyping tools come with UI components and specific things such as image placeholders, like navigation bars, other components for phones and websites that you can just drag and drop. So you can create low fidelity screens, but high fidelity becomes a little bit trickier inside prototyping tools. Now you're going to ask me when you see this, okay, then prototyping tools are not better. Let me tell you one thing. What we saw now, only covers click-through prototypes, basically, if you think about that. Like the very, very basic prototypes that you might need, to showcase to your colleagues or professors or whatever. Prototyping is literally a huge thing, like sky's the limit with prototyping. You can make so realistic things that it would blow your mind to know how much you can do with prototyping tools. So if I expand this menu a little bit more, with more options, so if I want to prototype with no design, if I want to design something in design tools, I need to have design skills. So, and at the same time, design tools, you need to create everything on your own. They do not have a library of assets, such as the ones I mentioned before, UI components, icons, ready-made assets that you can really, templates, things like that. Design tools also don't have audio and video elements, which are very important in prototypes, especially the ones that contain a lot of, like music apps, like video apps, like YouTube, things like that. You sometimes need in prototypes to do micro animations. You cannot really do very detailed microanimations in design tools, and you cannot apply conditional logic. So if I do this, this happens. If I click there, that happens. But if this time passes, then maybe that other thing happens. So you cannot really do that in design tools. And also, design tools don't have very elaborate user testing capabilities. And this is where prototyping tools, are really essential if these features are important to you. In prototyping tools, you can prototype even without having any design skills, whereas in the design tool, you need the design skills because, the name says it by itself, they're design tools. So, they're kind of like targeting designers. You have very big libraries in most prototyping tools with many different drag and drop assets that you can use to build very quick prototypes. Audio and video control, microanimations, conditional logic, and user testing capabilities, as most of the prototyping tools usually integrate with user testing platforms to make your job easier with that. So again, I'm just presenting all of this to tell you that you have options. I'm not presenting this to tell you don't use design tools or use only prototyping tools. What I'm saying is, if you need something simple, design tools can do the job for you. If you need one step further than that, you're going to struggle with design tools. And instead of making your life difficult, if you see that it's something that you need to do often or is important for your work, it's better that you get acquainted with a prototyping tool and you try to learn that well, and you try to improve your skills with that, so that you can really impress your stakeholders, your colleagues, your professors, you name it, whomever you work with. So yeah, that's what this section was all about. So question number 4, let me remind you, was which tools shall I use? And we spoke about prototyping tools and design tools. And now we have the 5th and final question, which is, how should I get feedback? Prototypes are great for us to kind of like practice and like get a boost of confidence about what our application or website or whatever is going to look like. However, actually, no idea that we have can be valid without receiving feedback and knowing that it has applicability to a specific, at least a specific number of people. Even if it's a niche product, we need to know that there is a market for it. So feedback is very important for prototypes to be able to get proof of concept, to be able to improve our prototype, and thus consequently our application in the future, and so on. So there is this common saying that you might find online, which says that 5 users can reveal 85% of the problems. I read many different things about this quote. Some people say that it's kind of like an urban design legend, that it's not really true. Some people say that it's actually accurate. You might come across this at some point. It's quite popular. It circulates a lot out there on the internet. I'm not sure if this quote is true or not. What I can tell you from my personal experience is that some testing is better than 0 testing, for sure. I'm absolutely certain about this. Even if you do the basic, the most minimum testing, it will give you some knowledge that you didn't have before. So if you can afford to do that, not just, like financially, but also time-wise and effort-wise, please go ahead and do it. One important thing that we need to know about testing always, and you might have known this from your studies in the past, is that every testing process needs a sample. Samples are important for the test to give us concrete results that we can trust and that we can count on to proceed with iterations and decisions. So I have here put together a few slides that summarize the main kind of options that you have when it comes to sampling, where you should pull your sample from. One option is to user test with friends, family, and colleagues. This is something that is particularly popular with students, very early startups, people that want to begin a startup, but they don't know where to start from, or they don't have access to a wider audience. So it is an option for sure. There are pros and cons, of course. So if you recruit your sample from friends, family, and colleagues, the pros are that it's free, clearly. At least I hope so. I mean, if your friends, like charge you for some feedback, then maybe you need to reconsider your friend circle. Then it gives you a confidence boost because you are among people that and feel comfortable with. So obviously you can talk with them in more detail, and you can discuss your vision and your dreams, and this really gives you a confidence. It's not just like a dry test. And it's also time efficient because it's easier to plan things with friends, family, and colleagues rather than to arrange things with people that you don't know. There are cons, of course, as well. The sample is usually small. Most of us know a handful of people. Maybe we keep in touch daily or weekly with 20, 30 people, even 50, but still the sample is quite small. And it's very likely that most of these people might not be your end users. So let's say, for example, if I am developing a Forex application for people that want to invest in foreign currency, it's very likely that my father or mother might not have this, kind of like gambling spirit, and they might not have invested before, and they might not really know how that works. So they might give me feedback on what the application looks like, or if the name sounds nice to them, but they won't really be able to tell me if, the step-by-step process makes sense. And obviously, friends, family, and colleagues might be and probably are biased. They know you, they want what's best for you, but at the same time, they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they might sugarcoat some harsh truths, or they might not even, like reveal some truths to you and just tell you, oh, this looks lovely, go ahead with it. And at the end of the day, you didn't really manage to get a lot of information. So whenever you try to user test with people from your circle, make sure that it's at the very, very early stage, that you ask them to judge specific things that is within their knowledge, such as, like maybe the color palette that you're thinking, or the logo if they like it, or the name of the app, or just if they find it easy to click through, but don't go into more depth because they might be biased. Another source where you can pull your sample from is from your existing user base. Obviously, this kind of implies that you have a user base, so you have clients already that use your product. So if you have these clients and you can reach out to them, you can get feedback on how to improve your application or your product, or to get feedback on a new product that you are thinking about launching in the future. The pros about approaching your existing user base is that it can be free or it can be very cheap. Like, you can incentivize your user base if you want. One thing that we usually do when we want feedback from our user base is that we incentivize people by telling them that for each questionnaire that they fill in or each interview that they complete, we are going to contribute a specific amount, let's say $5 for a good cause, let's say cleaning the oceans, or protection of specific animal species, and so on. So this is a good way to incentivize them and do something good for our environment, or some specific community or group of people. Another pro is that they're familiar with the product, or at least if you are thinking to launch a new product, with kind of like the product category that you are active in. And it helps you build a connection with your users. If you recruit from your user base, it helps you know your users, understand them better. Some cons from recruiting from your user base: it's a little bit hard to schedule. I mean, let's face it, the truth is that your users will not prioritize you over their daily work or family. You're always going to be towards the end of their priority list. So, you are going to be lucky if you manage to schedule, 5, 10, 15 interviews at most. In case you're considering improving your existing product or launching a new one, you might have confidentiality issues because you might reveal information to your users that they might circulate to your competition, or they might write about on a blog or social media, and that might be an issue for you and your company. And it also builds expectations, because sometimes you might tell your users, listen, I'm considering this new feature, would you like to test it with me? And then they really expect that you're going to launch this. If you don't, because for some reason the feedback you got was poor, or you change your priorities, then some of them are going to be very disappointed. So yeah, that covers pulling sample from your existing user base. Another source of sampling of users to test your prototype is to address a testing platform and ask them for help. There are many testing platforms out there. They're very professional. They have a big panel of people. They can really do wonders. But you know, they are mostly recommended for people who are very serious about what they're doing. They have a specific vision and they're confident and adamant that this is the way they're going. Because usually, you know, this is a bit of a bigger commitment. There is a bit of a cost associated with it. We're going to see now in the pros and cons. So the pros of going with a user testing platform, very wide variety of users. Like literally, you can go as granular as you want. If you need, I don't know, like females aged 40 to 60 from Arabic countries that have a family, they can help you find those people. And it's also time efficient because they organize this for you. So they find the sample. You don't need to start emailing people and, you know, scheduling calls. The cons, it's costly. That's why I mentioned it's better to look into this option towards the later stages or when you're really sure that this is the idea you're going for. And potentially there is a chance that, you know, the sample might not know your product, although there is a wide variety of users that user testing platforms can address. Sometimes they might not know your existing product if you are kind of like thinking to improve it and you are prototyping to improve your existing product. So that might be one of the downsides here. So we answered the question, where should I pull my sample from? And now let's say we have our sample, so we know whom we want to interview or we know whom we want to address. Which is the platform that we want to, you know, talk to them through? Like, where do we want to contact them? You can user test via sharing link from your prototyping tool. So if you are using a prototyping tool or a design tool for that matter, you can generate a share link. You can send it to people via email. They can check it and give you feedback via comments. The pros of this method is that it's free because you are already paying for your prototyping tool or your design tool. So, you know, generating share links usually doesn't cost extra. Usually, in some cases where there is a freemium model for the tool, maybe you need to pay something to generate share links, but it's free or cheap, let's say. It's time efficient because, you know, you are in your tool already, you generate the link, you send it to people via email. You don't need to schedule calls with them. They can do it at their own spare time, and they send you the feedback when they can. Also the feedback mechanism is built in most of these tools, which means that you're going to receive notifications. You don't need to exchange tons of emails with people. You're just going to receive notifications, go into your prototype and see what people wrote and take it from there. The cons, there may be a few coordination challenges, especially in case your prototype is not, you know, very intuitive or it's not very final. You might need to explain to people how to achieve specific goals, and to do that, you might need to write a very long email or have a call with them beforehand to kind of like explain how this works. Some users might not need that, but some others might. So this is a potential challenge here. And also the consolidating the feedback can be a challenge, because imagine that you send a share link to, let's say, 20 people, and within a week you have, I don't know, like 200 comments inside your prototype. This was a bit difficult for me to understand. I'm not sure why this button took me there. I would fix this here because it's not very visible, let's say, this UI element, and so on. So a lot of feedback, and you need to find a mechanism to read it and kind of like decrypt it and learn something from it. So this can be very challenging. Another platform where you can test with your sample is via video conferencing. So the tools that we all got way too familiar with in the last couple of years with COVID. Some of the logos you will recognize, you know, from your workplace or your studies. The pros of doing user testing with video conferencing, which, by the way, in case you're wondering, how you can do testing with video conferencing is that you can do it via screen sharing, essentially. So you can basically send, let's say, your prototype to a user, to a potential user, ask them to screen share, ask them to complete a specific job, and see how they're doing it and how much time it takes them, where they get stuck, where they get frustrated, or where they achieve things with with great ease. So you can learn more about their behavior live. The pros of doing user testing via video conferencing is that for the most part, it's free. If you have your own personal account in most of the above services, you don't need to pay anything. You can fix this around your schedule as you wish. You can beforehand, schedule a video conference with the other people, have it in your calendars, and just meet on that specific time. It's a bit better to coordinate because you are live with the other person, so you can explain to them in the beginning what their requests are and their requirements, what they need to do, and you can make sure that they understand before they start testing, so it's a bit easier to coordinate. And you are sure to get some feedback because, again, you have people right there in your face, you are in their face as well, and you just ask them, so how was it? And they need to give you an answer. So, it's not like an email where you might never get a response because people were, overloaded with work or something. So yeah. Some cons of this channel. It can be time consuming. Like imagine having 10 or 15 or 20 Zoom chats, with people. And if they get confused, they might drag longer and so on and so forth. There is a danger of bias, which is true for any case where you see your testers eye to eye. Whenever people see you, they feel like they need to be nicer to you, let's say, or sometimes even nastier to you, depending on how they feel about you or your product. But still, there is a bias, positive or negative. The sample is most likely small because you just don't have time to arrange so many calls, or you cannot find too many people that want to have calls with you. Sorry, I had not realized this was the last point. So in case you guys are taking screenshots or something, so these were all of the points for video conferencing. The next platform, we mentioned before, pulling your sample from a user testing platform, but you can also use user testing platforms to conduct the whole experiment. So actually you can give a scenario or a script to a person who is, specialized with testing, and they can find the sample for you and run the whole test and take notes and pass you on this feedback from what people found easy, difficult, frustrating, and so on, while using your prototype. By the way, user testing platforms can conduct both moderated and unmoderated tests, task-based, so you tell them you need to complete task 1, task 2, task 3, and see how much time it takes them, for example. Or it can also be automated testing. So quite a lot of options that are a little bit difficult to address on your own when you try to, organize testing sessions with your sample. The pros of conducting user testing fully in a user testing platform. As mentioned before, huge pool of users. They will do the whole job for you. They will find them. You don't need to bother. There is confidentiality. I mentioned earlier that when you, for example, test with your own users, there might be issues of confidentiality, but with user testing platform, the test can happen in a way that people don't know which product this is. They might not, be exposed to this information. Or, for example, they might sign some kind of confidentiality agreement beforehand. And also, it's easier to consolidate the results because they help you do it. So they can put together a report for you to kind of understand which are the main trends and what people seem to like or dislike the most. And the cons, it's usually costly, as mentioned also earlier. It's a bit consuming to set it up because you need to explain to the person representing the user testing platform how to do this, what you need to achieve. They might not know your product. You need to walk them through it. And potentially some of the people in the sample might not know the product very well. So they might give you feedback, but they might not be end users necessarily, or they might not, be exposed to many products similar to yours. And you don't really have direct control over that because you're not the one collecting the sample. So there might be odd cases where you might have this issue. So that was all. These were the 5 questions that we believe here in Proto.io that you need to answer before you start prototyping. I know it's a lot of information, but I hope I gave you some insights and some help on how to navigate this. And I hope you try to apply some of these things in your daily life and your work as well. So let me stop sharing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Konstantinos. Take a second to take a deep breath, take a sip of water. That was a lot of great information. We had a few questions come through over in the question section just while you were talking that I'd love to run past you. I know we're just coming up on the end of the hour here, so if anyone on this call needs to hop off now, thanks so much for being here, and you will be able to watch the full recording on our YouTube page afterward. So if you'd like to come back and see the answers to those questions, you'll definitely be able to.
Happy to answer also any questions on LinkedIn, guys. If you want, add me there. You can see my name on your screen right now. Add me there, and if I don't have time to answer your question, I'll be happy to on a personal level. So, yeah.
Thanks. That's amazing. So our first question was from Vishal, who wanted to ask about jumping from low level to high level in terms of fidelity. Is it okay to do so and kind of skip the medium fidelity, as it looks like the medium fidelity often can be quite similar to low fidelity or high fidelity?
I would say if you have a chance to start from medium fidelity, do that instead. So start from medium and go to high. It might be a little bit more insightful and put things more into perspective. If you don't have that opportunity, let's say because you lack the tools or the knowledge at that moment and you can only do a hand sketch, sure, yeah, you can do that. Honestly, you can do anything that works depending on the specific scenario or case. But my suggestion is if you can afford to do medium then high, just go with that preferably.
Thanks. Barb had a question that Anna helped answer in the chat, and I just wanted to see if you had any additional thoughts you wanted to add. She asked, would you say that high interaction fidelity is equivalent to micro interactions? And Anna responded that high interaction fidelity definitely contains micro interactions, but not only. It could also have other complicated animations or interactions.
Yeah, that is a correct answer. It can also have conditional logic, which is, it takes a little bit of a more mathematical thinking to kind of like put together. So yeah, I would say that think about it as close to a finished product as it can be. When you use a finished product like an application or a website, it has very complex animations inside, and this is what a high interaction fidelity would look like. So yeah, what Anna responded was correct. Yeah.
Great. Shannon has asked which prototyping tools you recommend to get started. Of course, we recommend Proto.io, I would imagine. I don't know if there's any other thoughts you wanted to share.
There's tons. Most of them also have like free trials. And, obviously I recommend Proto.io because I know it can cover basically the needs of both beginners and kind of like very advanced users. If you are a beginner but you use design tools, you can start from there, get familiar with the basics, and then move to prototyping tools. But honestly, like, tons of tools, really. I mean, the prototyping space has grown so much that I would not do justice by just like mentioning a couple of names. I think it really depends on people. But yeah, I would say you can start a trial of Proto.io or start from a design tool and then move on to a prototyping tool for sure.
Great. I know you just said you don't want to necessarily name specific ones, but this next question does call out a couple specific tools. So just let us know your thoughts. Fine. Shashank asks, hi, Konstantinos, if you choose between Axure and InVision for prototyping, which would you choose and why?
So to be honest, because personally, I don't build prototypes on a daily basis, maybe I'm not the right person to answer this question. I know that InVision became a bit more popular with people that kind of like also have no prior experience of prototyping. It grew very fast in the past few years. And so I think that this kind of like covers more cases. If I'm not mistaken, Azure or Axure, I'm not sure how they pronounce that, is a bit more tailored for more experienced users, but I might be mistaken. Again, maybe I'm not the right person to answer this question because I'm not a designer myself. So yeah, again, like, I think that it really depends on what you want to achieve, to be honest. Like, nobody can tell you use this or that because your needs might be very different from another person's. Some tools have a kind of like more steep, let's say, learning curve, but it pays off. and some others seem to be very easy to learn, but then you see that their capabilities are a little bit more like restricted. So yeah, I would say if you prototype a lot and you need it for your work, definitely try 3-4 different tools until you find the one that really hits all the right spots, if I can like say that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Melissa has asked, when you're talking about confidentiality with your existing user base, is there a way to get them to agree not to reveal to anyone what they are prototyping?
I mean, you can ask them to sign kind of like a confidentiality agreement, but it makes it more difficult for them to agree to participate to the test, because people kind of see these, user testing sessions as a casual way to get to know you, get to know your product, give you feedback, and kind of like earn back in the way that you improve the product that they use every day. So they don't expect, to have to sign a lot of forms and go into like legal details. So yeah, sure, you can do it. But I would expect that many people would get a bit afraid of the legal language on all of these documents. So, yeah.
That's fair. And I can imagine it can get complicated quickly depending on where your users are located in different legal systems.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Great. So final question that we have here for you today was from Shashank, who asks, how difficult is it to develop a design system in Proto.io? Is it possible? And please share your experience on developing robust design systems.
A design system. So design systems can be quite complex because they require the use of, a lot of like patterns and symbols and things like that. I would say to an extent you can do that in Proto.io, but because we lack some of these functionalities, at least to a very developed kind of stage, it can get you up to a point. So if you want a really, really detailed, robust organization-wide, like you work in a big company, and this is going to be the Bible for everyone, maybe this is not the right tool for you to do it in. However, if you're a smaller organization, you want to get started and kind of like set up some rules and have some cleanliness, let's say, within your design approach, you can definitely do that. But I would not say that it's like made for developing a design system per se. No.
Got it. Well, thank you so much again for your time today, Konstantinos. It's been great having you here. Thanks for everyone who's been participating. I'm just dropping the link to Design Lab's YouTube page so you all can find the recording of this video once we post it later. If you want to watch back anything, any of the great info that Konstantinos shared with us today. And otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. And we'll just say goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.